The original Mask, 1997 to 2003. Kane's story doesn't begin with fire, it begins with silence. A man built cut, the organ music screamed, and there he was, a 7-foot demon in red and black. His face locked behind a jagged mask. Half burned victim, half nightmare fuel. They said he was Undertaker's brother. They said he crawled out of a burning funeral home, carrying scars on his skin and in his soul. But what mattered wasn't the story, it was the mask. That mask didn't just cover a man, it created one. For 6 years, the original Kane mask turned Glenn Jacobs into a walking horror movie. He was silent. He was brutal. He was unstoppable. And yet, the most mythical character in wrestling suddenly had a brother who was even darker. This was Kane at the unmasking era, 2003 to 2005. For 6 years, the mask gave Kane power. But in 2003, WWE made him take it off. And the monster we thought was born in fire became human. The night Kane unmasked, the arena didn't cheer. They didn't boo. They gasped. What stood in the ring wasn't a demon. It was a man. His face shaved bald, his eyes wide with rage, his mouth trembling as though he had just lost the only thing that made him whole. Kane ripped off the mask and suddenly he wasn't hiding anymore. He was exposed. But instead of scars on his skin, the scars were in his mind. What followed was darker than the mask ever was. He snapped, attacking anyone in sight. Jim Ross because monsters with masks, you can fight them. But monsters with nothing to lose, they'll burn everything just to feel alive. For 2 years, Kane terrorized WWE without the mask. And while fans still debate whether removing it killed his mystique, in truth, it revealed what the mask had always hidden. That Kane was never just a character. He was the fractured mind of Glenn Jacobs, trapped between storylines, between gimmicks, between sanity and chaos. Once the mask was gone, the fire burned differently, hotter, louder, more desperate. This wasn't Kane the monster, this was Kane the man, begging us to keep believing. But once you unmask a legend, you can never put it back the same way again. The Impostor Kane, 2006. In 2006, WWE did something unthinkable. They cloned a monster. For one night, Kane stood across the ring from Kane. Same mask, same gear, same fire. But something was off. The walk wasn't the same. The stare didn't cut through you. It was like watching a bootleg horror movie, familiar but fake. The imposter Kane was played by young Drew Hankinson years before he became Luke Gallows. The idea was simple. Kane's past would haunt him, literally. His sins, his scars walking back into his life with the same mask he once wore. But the execution? A disaster. Fans didn't buy it. The original Kane wasn't just a costume, he was a presence. Once you tried to replicate it, you proved what the mask really meant. Kane wasn't replaceable. The feud lasted barely a month before WWE dropped it. No explanation, no closure. The imposter Kane was dragged out of storylines like he never existed. It was one of the strangest experiments in WWE history, and maybe the saddest. Because when you put two Kanes side by side, only one truth became clear. The fire only answered to the original. Once the mask moved without him, the fire no longer answered to his name. Team Hell No, The Unlikely Brotherhood, 2012, reunited 2018. By 2012, Kane had burned cities, unmasked himself, and even fought his own imposter. He was a monster without a clear direction. So WWE did something insane. They gave him a tag partner who was his exact opposite, Daniel Bryan, the tiny, angry, yes, no, shouting technician. It should have been a joke, a comedy act, and in some ways it was. Anger management therapy skits, hug it out segments, the big red machine sitting in a therapist's office being told to share his feelings. But somehow it worked. For the first time, Kane wasn't a demon or a puppet. He was funny, he was awkward, he was human, and fans loved it. Team Hell No became one of the most popular tag teams of the decade, not because they dominated matches, but because they made people laugh and cheer at the same time. Kane screaming, "I'm the tag team champions," became just as iconic as his fire entrances. When they reunited briefly in 2018, it reminded everyone that even the darkest characters can become light when you pair them with the right partner. Team Hell. No proved something the mask never could, that Kane wasn't trapped by one face. He could be terrifying and hilarious, sometimes in the very same night. For a monster, that's the rarest evolution of all. The corporate Kane era, 2013 to 2016. There's a saying in horror movies: the scariest thing a monster can do is take off the mask and put on a suit. By 2013, Kane wasn't haunting wrestlers anymore. He was signing paperwork. Gone were the flames, the jagged red mask, the myth of a demon brother. In its place, Glenn Jacobs in a gray business suit walking down the ramp like a middle manager on his lunch break. This was corporate Kane. The big red machine became an authority puppet. Instead of chokeslams through fire, it was board meetings, company speeches, and enforcing Triple H and Stephanie's will. Fans hated it. Not because it was boring, but because it was wrong. The monster who once set Jim Ross on fire was suddenly handing out HR memos. The fire that once made arenas gasp was now a corporate logo. But here's the thing. This Kane was terrifying in a different way. Because what's scarier than a monster? A monster who has been tamed. Corporate Kane wasn't meant to be feared. He was meant to be pitied. He represented what happens when legends get trapped inside a machine bigger than themselves. From fire to filing cabinets, Kane became a walking metaphor for how WWE could strip down its own monsters and turn them into company men. It was the most human Kane had ever been, and the most soulless. The mayoral Kane post-WWE. What's the scariest thing a monster can do? Not burn down a ring, not crush a legend. The scariest thing a monster can do is become ordinary. In 2018, the Big Red Machine did something nobody could have scripted. He traded fire for ballots, pyro for parades. Kane, the devil's favorite demon, was elected mayor of Knox County, Tennessee. The same man who once set Jim Ross on fire was now shaking hands at ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The same monster who buried his brother alive was now talking about tax codes and job growth. The world laughed. The headlines wrote themselves, "The demon is now a mayor," and shed them all until only one remained. Not Kane the demon, not Kane the wrestler, but Kane the man. And maybe that was the most shocking face of all, because when you strip away the mask, the fire, the stories, what was left wasn't a monster at all. It was a survivor, a man who lived 10 lives in one lifetime, from the darkest corners of wrestling to the fluorescent lights of politics. The monster didn't die. He just learned how to smile for the cameras. The monster returns. Nostalgia runs. They say monsters don't retire. They wait. They linger. And when the fire calls, they answer. After politics, after suits, after the masks sat in storage, the lights would still cut. The pyro would still explode. And Kane would walk through the smoke one more time. Royal Rumbles, anniversary specials, surprise chokeslams to remind the locker room that no matter how many years passed, the fire still lived. He didn't need storylines anymore. He was the storyline. The crowd knew it. Every time the fire hit, arenas erupted like it was 1997 again. Because Kane wasn't just a wrestler. He was a living ghost, a figure from the nightmares of childhood suddenly standing in front of you again. Older, heavier, slower, but still carrying that same aura. And that's why these returns mattered. They weren't about titles. They weren't about feuds. They were about reminding you that monsters never disappear. They just wait for the right moment to come back and scare you one last time. But every flame flickers. Each return burned a little shorter, a little weaker, and the crowd cheered not just for the monster, but for the memory of what he once was. The Big Red Machine wasn't invincible anymore. He was mortal. And that, somehow, made him scarier. The legacy of Kane. Every mask eventually cracks. Every fire eventually burns out. But legends? Legends don't die. Kane was never just one man. He was 8 different faces, stitched together with fire and fear. He was the silent monster in red, the broken man without a mask, the comedy act in anger management, the corporate puppet, the mayor, the ghost who kept coming back. And somehow, all of them were real, because Kane's story wasn't about a mask, or a gimmick, or even a character. It was about transformation, about how one man carried 1,000 lives inside him and made every single one feel larger than life. Undertaker may have been WWE's dead man, but Kane was something scarier. He tells a different truth. The original mask, fear. The unmasking, pain. The impostor, identity. Hell no, humor. Corporate, submission. Mayor, transformation. The returns, memory. Together, they weren't just a career. They were a lifetime. And when the fire finally goes dark for good, we'll remember what it felt like when the lights cut out. The pyro hit and the Big Red Machine walked through the smoke. Not just a wrestler, not just a monster, but every mask we've ever worn and every face we're afraid to show. That was Kane. That is Kane. And that will always be Kane.